Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll start just by saying I intend to split my time with the member for Edmonton Strathcona. This is the first time I've had occasion to speak in the House since my father, Bill Blaikie, passed away on Saturday, and I'm hoping that there will be time at some point for a more a proper and fulsome tribute. But for now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a big thank you to all of my colleagues and people in the parliamentary precinct and beyond. Canadians across the country have reached out with some really lovely messages about ways that my father's life and work inspired them in their own work. And I'm very grateful for those messages, as is my mother, Brenda, and my sisters, Rebecca, Jessica, Tessa, and our entire family. So I just wanted to say a great big thank you to everyone who has been part of that. Of course, it means a lot to us, and it would mean a lot to my dad, because he really did love Parliament. And for all its shortcomings and disappointments and faults, that love was born of a very real belief that it can be a place for positive and constructive dialogue that can bring our country to a better place if we do it well in this place. And so it's in that spirit that I want to offer some remarks today on the Conservative Opposition Day motion. There are two things about it that I think need to be called out. And the first has to do with the very proposal in the motion, which is to say that the emphasis of government right now should be on broad-based tax cuts as a way to fight inflation. And I think even if the Conservatives are putting this forward in the best of faith, that they've got it really wrong. They've been out there saying for a long time that, more money chasing fewer goods leads to more inflation. And the fact of the matter is that broad-based tax cuts, as opposed to targeted income support for people who really are on the margins and are struggling with choosing whether they're going to put some food item back on the shelf or not, or people who are struggling now with homelessness because they actually lost their place to live, or people who are on the cusp of that, as opposed to some of us who are experiencing discomfort as a result of inflation and maybe having to pass up some things that we would really rather like, but at the end of the day aren't vital. The fact of the matter is that providing income support to those people who really are at financial risk is the way to bring Canada through this extraordinary moment of inflationary pressure that everyone is feeling in some way, shape, or form, in the best possible way, doing the least possible damage to the smallest number of Canadian families. That's why the NDP believes in doubling the GST rebate. It's why we fought for an increase in payment on the Canada Housing Benefit. It's why we believe looking to structurally change the cost of things that Canadians can't do without, like, for instance, childcare and dental care and prescription drugs, is a better way to combat inflation, because that isn't exactly because it isn't doing what Conservatives say they're concerned about. But we heard just at the Finance Committee yesterday that even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which I think it's fair to say is by no means understood as a progressive organization, these guys have been the chief deregulators and tax cutters and defunders and cutters of the public service for decades. And even they have said that broad-based tax cuts right now are going to fuel inflationary pressures in exactly the way that the Conservatives say we must not do. And the reason for that is because broad-based tax cuts put more money back in the pocket of the people who need it the least. The more wealthy you are, the more money you already have, the more you will benefit from broad-based tax relief. Earlier, a Conservative member talked about students who are living in homeless shelters and single mothers who are worried about ending up homeless. They are not going to benefit in the same way as people living in far richer neighborhoods from broad-based tax relief. If those are the people, and seniors who are living on low fixed incomes, if those are the people that we want to help, then we need to do that with targeted income support. That's the way to do it, both to get more help to the people that need it most, but also to avoid delivering more money into the pockets of people that will use that as disposable income because they already have a fair bit of income. And so that's why there's a real difference of approach between the New Democrats on the one hand and the Conservatives on the other. You can tell sometimes I think the Liberal government feels caught in between, and their recipe would be to do nothing, to just watch the debate happen between Conservatives and New Democrats and stand back. And it's why it's important to push. And it's why I'm grateful to Canadians for having elected 25 New Democrats to this parliament to do that work of pushing. Because we know when we first proposed a doubling of the GST rebate, the Liberals said no. That was well over 6 months ago. And in time and with persistent advocacy by New Democrats in the chamber and many, many voices in civil society outside the chamber, we were able to get the government to change course. I think that's a story of success for Parliament. I think that's a story that the Canadians, that the Parliament Canadians elected is doing the work they want us to do. Sometimes it's messy, it's not always pretty, it's not always fun to watch, but there's a job getting done here, and it's because of the wisdom of Canadians in electing a minority parliament with strong voices on many sides of the House that we're able to move forward. The second thing that I want to call out about this motion, which is a pet peeve of mine, and we've heard it a bit before already today, is talking about increases in EI premiums and the CPP as payroll tax. And part of this is, if it was just a matter of arguing about words, then it wouldn't matter. I don't care that accountants call EI premiums and CPP payroll tax. If that's what they want to do within their profession for ease of accounting, that is fine by me. But when politicians start to use payroll tax as a euphemism, fighting payroll tax increases as a euphemism for fighting against properly funding our employment insurance system, I have a problem with that. When politicians use lowering payroll taxes as a euphemism for fighting against Canadians' pensions and denying increases in Canadians' pensions, especially when they're talking about out the other side of their mouth about how much they care about seniors on fixed incomes, I have a problem with that. And that is a major problem with this motion and what we've been hearing from the Conservatives today. Part of the path for supporting people that are experiencing homelessness now who weren't a couple of years ago, who are continuing to struggle with the difficulties of the economy that we're in, that has a lot of jobs available in certain sectors of the economy, but still is a difficult employment situation for other parts of the economy. There are people that are trained up for those parts that have experience in parts of the economy that are still struggling, including tourism and hospitality, for instance. Those are industries that are struggling in various ways. I think the hospitality sector is coming back, but just because there's a job posted, if the employer is only willing to offer 3-hour shifts, the help wanted sign in the window doesn't mean what a lot of Canadians think it means. It doesn't mean a full-time, well-paying, family-supporting job on the other end of that help wanted sign. And so, yes, we need to rebuild the EI system. We've known that. We knew that before we went into the pandemic. All the more is the shame on this government for having reverted to the pre-pandemic employment insurance rules on September 24th without having a solve, without revealing the details of these consultations that they've been doing, or having a better system in place in the first place, because employment insurance was leaving far too many people behind before the pandemic. We all know that. We all know that it needed to change. And yet, here we are moving away from the temporary rules of the pandemic that weren't perfect, but were certainly better than what we had before. And we've gone back. So yes, EI premiums, after having been frozen during the pandemic, are eventually going to go up. That's part and parcel of providing insurance so people don't lose their home when they lose their job in difficult economic circumstances. A party that really had the back of working people would understand that and not try to cover over their opposition to a proper EI system with euphemisms like lower payroll taxes. And the same is true of the Canada Pension Plan. We're at a point where the Canada Pension Plan finally is going to have another tranche for workers down the road. They're going to start to have to pay into that, as will employers. That's part of building better public pensions so that less conservative politicians and others in the future will stand up to say how sad they are that seniors don't have a proper income. That's what's wrong with what's going on here, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the time to lay it out.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Mississauga-Streetsville.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. I would like to
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For his remarks. Our government is working to put money back in the pockets of Canadians, as he mentioned, like doubling the GST tax credit. Our government has supported businesses and Canadians through the pandemic, helping Canadian families with affordable childcare. Madame la Présidente, through you, I'd like to know if my colleague believes if this motion demonstrates a concrete plan to make life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you very much.
For Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, the short answer is no, I don't think it does, for many of the reasons that I highlighted in my remarks. And I am glad that this Liberal government has moved forward on many initiatives proposed by the NDP to try and reduce the cost burden that Canadians are facing. And I would take this opportunity to pitch another one. I invite the government to take us up on the idea of ensuring that the old age security or the old age security increase doesn't just apply to seniors 75 and over, but applies to all seniors who receive the OAS payment, because all seniors, regardless of their age, are experiencing the same cost pressures that seniors 75 and over are, and they should be entitled to the same increase in benefits. It doesn't make sense to have a two-tier system for seniors in Canada in respect of the OAS or any other income support benefit. So I encourage this government to take us up on that one too, and we'd be happy to get that done.
The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Elmwood-Transcona for his remarks. And I want to express my personal condolences on the passing of his father, Bill Blaikie, who was the Dean of the House of Commons when he was here, someone respected on all sides. And as a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, I know he had a passion for our country and those who serve it. And as someone who was inspired into politics through a parent of mine who served, I know he can be very proud of the son that he inspired into public service as well. I would like to ask the member, because I know, having lived in Winnipeg, families there are struggling. Grocery prices are going up 10, 20, 30% in the last few years. We've seen gas, rent, people at the margins particularly struggling. So when a government has the ability to either pause, reduce all input costs, whether they're taxes, whether they're changes to plans that run over decades, would the member not agree with the Conservative intent here, which is, with record inflation, highest point in his lifetime, because he's a young member, isn't this a time to take a pause and give Canadian families in Durham or in Elmwood-Transcona a break?
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the member for Durham for his kind words. Those are very much appreciated. And I want to say that I think there is a tension in the Conservative position that manifests even in his question. He's asking about how we can try and reduce input costs, recognizing, I think in part, that part of what has been going on in the economy and in inflation right now has very much to do with supply side pressures, not actually demand side pressures. And yet what we hear most often from the Conservatives is that this is demand driven and that it's about spending, and it's all about the government spending too much money, and that's what's driving up prices. In fact, there are many factors driving inflation. So very glad to hear an acknowledgement of some of the other pressures that are creating inflation outside of government spending. As he knows, I think the way to best deal with those is targeted relief with income support for people who really need it, because simply cutting taxes for everyone will allow those who are wealthier to drive inflationary costs with increased demand at a time where we don't need that extra pressure.
Honorable député de Berthier-Masquinongé.
The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also wish to extend my sincerest condolences to the member on my behalf and on the behalf of all my colleagues in the Bloc Québécois. I was very happy to hear my colleague mention that that old age security should increase for those over 65. I also appreciated his remarks about employment insurance. Here's my question. We need to collaborate. There's a minority government. His political party has decided to prioritize dental care, a federal dental care, but provinces are those who are best placed to handle dental care. I think we should just increase federal health transfers. Does the member feel that we should increase federal health transfer? And in negotiations with the Liberal Party, why didn't the member's party talk about reforming the employment insurance system rather than having this really hastily done new proposal for dental care? The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona. The member will not be surprised to know that the negotiations with the Liberal government can sometimes be very disappointing. In any negotiation, there are two parties. There are two sides. We did our best to ensure that wherever there was common ground, we could make progress. It is disappointing that Liberals are not New Democrats. It's disappointing to us that they don't want to do everything that we want to do, but we understand that Canadians elect the parliamentarians. The NDP and parliamentarians fight for everything that they believe in and do their best.
Resuming